everyone again. We know that most of you are very familiar with Zoom and you probably have attended a number of webinars already. However, before we start, I need to go over some house rules. We just want you to know that this Zoom call is being recorded. So if you will wish to watch or share a webinar recording, that will be possible on KAICIID's YouTube webinar channel. My colleague Anya will post the link in the chat. The second house rule, during the webinar, you are welcome to participate by writing your comments and questions in the chat. We will try to address them throughout the conversation. Please also note that this conversation and presentations will be in English and Arabic, and whenever our Arabic host speaks in Arabic, you will hear the translation. Therefore, if you don't understand Arabic, please select the English channel. 4, it would be great if you could introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where are you coming from and what is your profession, what was your motivation to join us today. So I will start by introducing myself. I am Kevor Kagopchian, the program manager for the KAICIID International Fellows Program. I have been working at KAICIID for almost 7 years now, and it's my privilege to moderate this session today. I'm also honored and privileged to be in company with a great and amazing speakers, Reverend Dr. John Pawliowski, Elder Justina Mike Ngaubia, and Dr. Syed Jawad Muhammad Taqi Al-Khoi. I will introduce them before their interventions, and my colleague Anya will post their bios also in the chat so you know them better. So now, without further ado, we are going to start the session. About the webinar today. A couple of days ago, actually exactly 3 days ago, on Sunday, 22nd of August, we celebrated the International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief, recognizing the importance of providing victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief and members of their families with appropriate support and assistance in accordance with applicable law. In this context, freedom of religion or belief, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to peaceful assembly, and the right to freedom of association are really interrelated and interdependent and mutually reinforcing. They are enshrined in Article 18, 19, and 20 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Since today we are focusing mainly on the freedom of religion and belief, let me introduce you what Article 18 of the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, say. So Article 18 says, everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right shall include freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of their choice, and freedom, either individually or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest their religion or belief in worship, observance, practice, and teaching. So what is the role of interreligious dialogue for this particular human rights, the right to freedom of religion and belief? Interreligious dialogue supports human rights, and its responsibilities lie by respecting the dignity of all human beings, regardless of their religious, ethnic, cultural, linguistic, and other backgrounds. IRD, interreligious dialogue, creates safe spaces for individuals and communities to practice their right to express their own views, as well as to communicate the responsibility to listen to each other's different perspectives. By using interreligious dialogue, we learn mutually from each other. We also retrieve the common values across religions. Interreligious dialogue allows us to address together and with all human beings of goodwill the many challenges of intolerance and discrimination based on religion or belief the world is facing today. So after this summary or introductory remarks on what do we understand by freedom of religion and belief and how interreligious dialogue can contribute to promote this right, we will start listening our speakers for today. Ladies first. So I will start with Elder Justina Mike Ngaubia. Elder Justina Mike is a peacebuilding practitioner, executive director for Justice, Peace and Reconciliation Movement, the founder of Women Peace Builders Network in Nigeria, as well as the co-chair for Women Peace Mentors and Mediators Forum in Nigeria. So, Elder Justina.
Yes.
We will start the session with a very simple yet crucial question. What does freedom of religion mean to you?
Thank you very much, Kefok. Before I continue, I really want to sympathize with my communities because this is really coming at the right time. We just celebrated a few days ago about people who have been victims just for the sake of the fact that they belong to one religion or the other. So I was affected. My communities have been affected. I was also displaced a few days ago. I had to be displaced because of challenges that happened in the city where I came from, which is Jos City. So I really understand what it means. The issue of freedom of religion and belief has been a contentious issue, and it has been very complex for over centuries today. And that is why, just like you said in your opening speech, you see a lot of treaties, a lot of conventions saying so many things on how people should be allowed. So for me, as a person and as a woman, freedom of religion or belief means a situation where people should be allowed, human beings should be allowed to exercise their religion, to exercise their beliefs without any, confrontation, without anybody stopping them from doing that. A situation where human beings are allowed to practice whatever they believe in and not being compelled or forced to go into another religion. So when we get to that level where people are given freedom to exercise and practice whatever belief they want to go by without being forced, then it means that freedom of religion is in practice. And I came from a society where, because of the fact that we have a lot of religious illiteracy, because we are not really educated when it comes to religious issues, we have a lot of challenges on that. Are people really allowed, for example, in Nigeria, to practice their religion without being disturbed or without being killed or without being, fought? That is the question that is very, very contentious this morning. So while we have to get to that extent where we allow people to exercise their freedom, their right, just as enshrined in the Constitution of Nations, especially in the Constitution of Nigeria, we have our fundamental human rights where people are allowed to express themselves. And then the United Nations Treaty also states that people have rights to express themselves, to practice their religion without being harassed. But today, my question is it really happening? Thank you.
Thank you, Justina. Considering that you have been working in the field of interreligious dialogue and interfaith relations for over 15 years, it's really impressive. Your passion is Christian-Muslim harmony and dialogue. You have also experienced in Nigeria how religion was used or misused as a tool for political manipulation. So using different religious groups for their own selfish gain, leading to violent conflicts. Your work today is a lot about empowering communities affected by religious conflicts. So we would like to know in particular, what is the role of women as one of the vulnerable groups when it comes to freedom of religion, where women play the role when it comes to women's rights and freedom of religion, where do women's rights meet with religion?
Thank you very much. Just like I said before I started, that we are befuddled with a lot of challenges in our society. Let me start by asking, do women also have rights? Coming from the culture where I came from, it's very difficult to define this. This is because as a cultural woman coming from Nigeria, once you grow, they will say that a woman has no culture or religion or right except when she is married. It has been a very serious issue. A woman, for example, once you get married, you are now the property of your husband. Everything that happens comes from your husband. If your husband said you should run, you run. If he says you should stop, you should stop. That is where it is in my culture. And that is why they will always tell you that a woman has no religion, a woman has no culture until he is married. But I want to say that organizations like KAICIID came, and when they came, they decided that such rules should not stand. I want to also say that a lot of women have done a lot of things, have played a lot of roles to make sure that such issues, such statements should not stand, because human rights are universal rights. And when we talk about human rights, it's supposed to be embedded in everybody present. And my question would be, why will we talk about women's rights when we are already talking about human rights? That question alone brings women into the state of vulnerability as well. So our society has been a dominant society, a society that is ruled in a patriarchal level where men decide everything that happens. As a Christian woman, let me start from there. If you go to the Bible, you will discover that there are people that wrote the word of God. And it has been written in such a way that some people use it to say that a woman is supposed to be seen and not heard. And when you come to churches today, some of these churches have been able to break these barriers, and women have been given right to practice their religion. They have been given right of leadership positions while in church. But there are some churches that are still there with that argument that a woman is supposed to be seen and not heard. A woman is not supposed to participate when it comes to religious issues. And this is not only ending in religion as well. If you come to societal issues, women are really, left behind. They are not allowed, to participate fully in decision-making processes. What is it that has brought this issue? Is it culture? Is it religion? Is it political issues? Or is it just the society we found ourselves that have brought women into that level they found themselves? So for me, back here at home in Nigeria, women have done a lot of things. And one of the things we have also discovered is that when we talk about gender issues or promoting gender engagement, you must have to work with men. And men have to be there to be at the forefront to speak on behalf of women. Because we are talking about human rights here. And when you talk about human rights, you also talk about human dignity. And if you want to dignify a human being, every human being should be considered, both men and women. And if you go to the world today, it has even gone beyond men and women. You go to people who have some LGBT rights, we need to give them all their rights. And this is what we are talking about. So for a woman, we are really saying that women bear most of the crunches of all the violence that happens in our society. For example, in Nigeria, today, as I am talking to you, Basa community, Basa local government of Jos Plateau State have been displaced. There are Christians and Muslims that have run, and over 30,000 people have been displaced today. Over 100 Christians and Muslims have been killed. And these 30,000 people who are displaced, if you get there, you will see that the majority of them are women and children. So these women who are always vulnerable are also denied the right to participate when it comes to decision-making processes. And that is the challenge. So the challenge is that women should be given space, both in religious setup, in political arena, they should be given space. If you go to UN today, a decision is being made, how many women sit in those seats? How many women are part and parcel of those decisions? And that means that we are denied our rights. Our rights are being denied. All over the world, it's not only in Nigeria. Women's rights are issues that is being contested every day. They are being affected, their children are affected, their husbands are affected, yet when it comes to decision-making processes, they are denied. So we need that space. We need to create that space where women can start talking. And today, thank God, because of the activities of KAICIID and things we have been doing, we have engaged a lot of women. We have been able to empower them to join in this very, very process to ensure that we have a women just and peaceful society, a society where women have a voice. Because women are natural peace builders. And if they are given a voice to engage in this interreligious dialogue, interreligious engagement, there will be peace. From last week up till now, I have seen a lot of things we have done as women to make sure that we bring the communities together who are fighting, Christians and Muslims. We went out, Christians and Muslims, women, and we said enough is enough. Our women are dying, our children are dying. We need to be given a voice. And that is what we are really talking about. So we need that freedom to be able to engage in that level as women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Justina. I can't agree more with you on the challenge of giving women more space and equal participation in all decision-making processes on different levels all over the world. And this brings me to remind ourselves what the international law says on this, like especially the treaty, the convention the Convention on Eliminating Discrimination Against Women, where the Article 2A says to embody the principle of the equality of men and women in their national constitutions or other appropriate legislation, the states have obligations to embody these principles legally and incorporate them into their constitutions and legal laws to ensure through law and other incorporated and other appropriate means the practical realization of this principle. And they also have to adopt appropriate legislative and other measures, including sanctions where appropriate, prohibiting all discrimination against women, not only when it comes to freedom of religion, but all types of discrimination. So now I will move to Reverend Dr. John Pawlikowski. Reverend Dr. Pawlikowski is a professor emeritus, Catholic Theologian Union. He's a board member of Council for the Parliament of the World's Religions and a former president for International Council of Christians and Jews. Reverend, I will ask you the same. What does freedom of religion mean for you? And also, what do you see as limits for religious freedom?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning from my side of the world. I would say for myself as a Catholic Christian, there are two important statements that developed and found and are foundational for my understanding of religious freedom and for what I believe is not only my understanding, but the authentic understanding of Catholicism. The first is in the document on religious liberty, the Declaration on Religious Liberty from the Second Vatican Council. That declaration represented a real change in the fundamental template of Catholic Christianity relative to religious freedom. Prior to that, and I can attest to the importance of the earlier view, in a study of the most widely used Catholic textbooks in the United States, in terms of how they present the other, including the religious other, it was very clear that indeed the religious other was frequently seen as a threat to Catholicism. This is especially true of Islam, that Islam was seen as an opponent, a threat to Christianity, to Christian hegemony. And of course, there were also the very classical, long-standing views of Jews and Judaism. It's in a way a threat as well, and as almost as a religion that was often seen in almost satanic eyes. We have to remember that as late as 1870, in his syllabus of errors, Pope Pius IX called religious freedom a satanic idea. So when the issue of religious freedom emerged at the council, the Vatican II Council, it was controversial. And any of you who know the history of the council know that the two most important interreligious documents, Nostra Aetate, which is translated in our time, and the Declaration on Religious Liberty, were very close on a couple of occasions of being removed from the agenda because some at the council saw them as in fundamental opposition to Catholic teaching. But in the end, the view presented by the late important Catholic theologian, Father John Courtney Murray, who together with Monsignor Pietro Pavan was responsible for the text of the Declaration, they prevailed thanks to the support, the firm support of Pope Paul VI, and also, I would say, the experience of the Catholic Church in the United States played an important role. The American bishops were very, very supportive of the Declaration on Religious Liberty. And why so? In many ways, they were not the most progressive force at the Second Vatican Council, certainly not in comparison to some of the Germans and the French and so on. But nonetheless, they had a certain experience because in the United States, in the 1930s and 1940s, a man named Monsignor John A. Ryan, whose work is perhaps not appreciated sufficiently, they formed a coalition, an interreligious coalition of Protestants, Catholics, and Jews, who were the primary groups in American society at the time. And their coalition was dedicated particularly to improving the rights and dignity of the working class. And in their cooperation, they came to know each other personally, and that was critical. They didn't necessarily change their theological perceptions of the other immediately. Reformation Sunday in the Protestant tradition still involved denunciations of the papacy on occasion. On Good Friday, Catholics and Protestants continued to attack Jews in their language and liturgy along traditional lines. But something had happened, and then what had happened was they got to know each other as human beings. And many of these old-standing perceptions, theological perceptions, began to wither away. And the change that occurred, and it's a profound change, that occurred in the Declaration on Religious Liberty was this creation of a new template. Prior to that, the official teaching of the Catholic Church was that right belief guarantees human rights. After Vatican II, in the light of the Declaration, human rights is a birthright, not based on whether your belief system is considered right or wrong. And that was a profound change because it really opened the door for a new way of the Catholic Church respecting and learning from other religious traditions. The other document I would mention is the much more recent, and it is the document from Abu Dhabi from the Pope's dialogue with the Grand Imam of El Azhar University, where the Pope stressed the primacy of human fraternity. And he also argued that God has many faces, and no religion has seen every face of God. And we can only learn about the fullness of God through dialogue and conversation with other religious traditions. And that, I think, even though Pope Francis didn't expand on that concept, but his notion that of the many faces of God, the authentic faces of God, represents, again, a new mindset in Catholic Christianity. And it's rooted, for Pope Francis, everything is rooted in his concept of human fraternity. And his encyclical Fratelli Tutti on human fraternity really puts human fraternity at the center of Catholic belief in a way that it wasn't prior to either the Second Vatican Council or the papacy of Pope Francis. So have all Catholics accepted this teaching? Unfortunately, no. It is still something that must be further integrated and developed to Catholic consciousness on a global level. But I think as a result of the Second Vatican Council, its declaration on religious liberty, its declaration on the Church's relationship to non-Christians, really set a new foundation that we're beginning to build on in global Catholicism at this time.
Thank you. You have written and published many books on Jewish-Christian relationship. Based on your experience, how dialogue between different religious communities plays a role when it comes to the application of human rights, and how freedom of religion is related to other fundamental rights like the freedom of speech, expression, freedom of assembly. Maybe you can share with our audience some of your findings researching the Holocaust.
Well, I think what you asked remains a complicated question in many respects. I think interreligious dialogue does a number of things. First of all, it certainly aims to remove longstanding former stereotypes of the other religion, including stereotypes which, as I mentioned, were found in the Catholic textbooks, which see Islam not in a positive light, but in a light which says Islam represents a threat to Christian hegemony. So those kinds of stereotypes, the stereotype of the Jewish people, which has lasted for so long, is another stereotype that can be removed through interreligious dialogue. When you meet the human person, that's what happened in the 1930s and 1940s in the United States. Catholics, Protestant Jews began to meet each other as human persons, not as stereotypical people who, were presented in a very negative way by the prevailing theology of the church. The second one is to assist us in learning the beauty and the insights of other religious traditions in order to strengthen our own faith and belief. Even the Second Vatican Council, in its document Nostra Aetate on interreligious relations, made a positive turn, but not a complete one. It affirmed in chapter 2 of the Declaration on Interreligious Relations that the Catholic Church certainly accepts anything that is good and true in other religious traditions. However, it still left the impression that Catholicism really had the totality of insight into who God was. And I think this is what Pope Francis has begun to change. And Pope Francis was building already on some previous efforts. I would particularly single out the Assisi meetings, where there was a sense, especially when Pope John Paul II simply stood amidst other religious leaders rather than to indicate a sort of equality of standing, which was quite different from the kind of dominance that was preached in terms of Catholicism by many in the church, even certainly prior to the Second Vatican Council, but even continuing after the Second Vatican Council. So we want to say, what can I learn? Now, for Christians in particular, the relationship with Judaism becomes central because more and more we're stressing how Jesus worked in the context of the Jewish tradition of his time, that what I would call, for want of a better term, the more progressive Jewish tradition of the time. And I think this was important even in terms, understanding this is important in terms of the human rights question, because one of the fundamental new ideas that was beginning to emerge in Judaism at the time of Jesus was the notion that we are all children of God. Now, you can say that's a kind of almost trite saying, but it isn't, because previously certain people were seen as divinely blessed in a way that you couldn't, most people couldn't attain. Mm-hmm. And what happened here was that the Pharisaic tradition began to change that and say, every person is born with a certain equality as a child of God. And while it may be a simple notion, it's a profound notion in terms of how, in an increasingly interreligious world, we organize human relationships and human cooperation. And finally, I would say, I think the purpose of interreligious dialogue is to gain new collaboration, to achieve new levels of collaboration on the major social crises of our time. And no one of those crises is more important than the ecological crises, because if we can't come together as an interreligious community and collaborate on creating a sustainable world, anything else we do has little value, because creation will not be able to be sustained if we don't act on this issue. And so I'm very, very proud to be part of a committee in the Vatican that is assisting in the promotion of Laudato Si. And I think the Pope's encyclical has been profound in terms of analyzing exactly why human collaboration and seeing interreligious dialogue as a buttress for human collaboration is so very important. I would say absolutely critical in our time.
Thank you. Thank you for your elaborated answer. I would move on now to ask Dr. Syed Jawad Muhammad Taqi Al-Khoi, who is the Secretary General of the Khoi Institute in Najaf, Iraq, a pioneering center that combines a traditional Islamic seminary with a contemporary interfaith academy. Dr. Syed, you are an expert on Islamic studies with focus on the theological roots of religious violence in Islam. What are your thoughts on connection between freedom of religion related to other fundamental rights like the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly? Where do you see the challenges and violence in the name of religion comes from? Is religious freedom discriminatory?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My pleasure. I am with you. Let me speak Arabic. هناك آيتان في القرآن الكريم آيتان صريحتان بعدم الإكراه. الآية الأولى في سورة البقرة حيث تقول الآية من شاء لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. والآية الثانية أيضا تشير بكل صراحة على الحرية الدينية، من شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. أساسا الدين عمل القلب، موضوعه ومحله القلب ونفس الإنسان، ولا يمكن أن يجبر الإنسان على حبه أو بغضه أو اعتقاده. بعبارة أوضح، هناك تضاد بين الاعتقاد والإيمان وبين الإكراه. فمن الطبيعي جدا أن المتدين هو الحر. المتدين هو الحر. الدين لا ينسجم ولا يستقيم ولا يقوم إلا مع الحرية. فلا يمكن أن نجبر الإنسان على اعتقاد معين، لأنه سيولد لنا مؤمنا منافقا. وحينما نقول مؤمن تسامحا ومجازا، وإلا هو يتظاهر بالإيمان وقلبه غير معتقد بذلك، فيكون منافقا، وهذا مما لا يريده الله عز وجل. النقطة الأخرى، الحرية بكل تأكيد لا تعني الفوضى وحياة الغابة. في كل المجتمعات، في كل الأمم، في كل الدول هناك عادات وتقاليد لا بد من احترامها. التلاعب، الإخلال بهذه العادات والتقاليد يوجب الاختلال بالأمن المجتمعي. فهناك توازن بين الحرية وبين التدين. الحرية لا تعني الفوضى، بل احترام الآخر، أحدهما يحترم الآخر. وإذا سمحتم لي أيضا أريد أن أشير إلى نقطة مهمة. لا ينبغي الخلط بين الدين والعادات والتقاليد. هناك كثير من الممارسات في مجتمعاتنا الشرقية، وربما أيضا في المجتمعات الغير الشرقية الأفريقية والآسيوية بشكل عام، هذه عادات وتقاليد لا ينبغي سحبها أو احتسابها على الدين. هذه عادات وتقاليد طبعا بكل تأكيد غير محببة. والتحديات التي تفضلتم تحديات كثيرة، تحديات اقتصادية، تحديات سياسية، تحديات هناك افتقار للعدالة الاجتماعية، هناك تمييز واضح بين أتباع الأديان والمذاهب في كثير من الدول، هناك تمييز كما تفضلت السيدة الفاضلة، تمييز بين الجندر الذكوري والأناث والأنثوي. فتحدياتنا كثيرة، لكن ربما من أهم التحديات استغلال اسم الدين واستغلال الرموز المقدسة والمقدسات للمصالح الشخصية والحزبية.
شكرا شيخنا. We have learned that there are many different experiences of human rights violations when it comes to the freedom of religion and how religion can be used to trigger further conflict. However, in addition to the already typical exploitation of religion and religious practices, recently the world was facing global pandemic and COVID-19 has affected religious groups tremendously. The cooperation or lack of cooperation, let's put it this way, between governments and religious communities in the fight against the pandemic, as well as the response of religious communities to anti-COVID-19 rules, included recently some litigation alleging the unequal treatment of religion in comparison with other activities or institutions. Dialogue between governments and religious communities and civil society in general is needed in these types of crises. So The government's measures against COVID-19 have raised an important issues regarding the proportionality of limitations or derogations of the freedom of religion and belief. So my next question will address some of those issues, particular reference to religious and of freedom. So I will start with you, Dr. Syed. Could you please share with us how COVID-19 affected the relationship between the state and the religious community in your own country, Iraq? Can you share some reflections as the pandemic is still evolving and so are government policies in different countries?
كيف أثر كوفيد-19 على الحوار؟
طبعا كوفيد 19 أثر على العالم بأسره في بعد ممكن أن نقلب التحديات إلى بعد إيجابي. أولا نتعاطف مع ضحايا كوفيد 19 في العالم وندعو الله تعالى أن يرفع هذا الوباء عن جميع البشرية عن جميع العالم في أقرب فرصة. بكل تأكيد تأثر العراق، التواصل المباشر افتقرنا إليه، هذا من أهم سلبيات كوفيد، التواصل الفيس تو فيس افتقرنا إليه، لكن بسبب التكنولوجيا كما فعلتم في كايسيد دروسنا أبحاثنا تواصلنا عبر التكنولوجيا الحديثة
مثل اليوم
كما حصل وتحقق اليوم. لكن هناك بعض التقارير تشير أن نسبة الإيمان بالله عز وجل ازدادت، بمعنى أن هذا الوباء وهذا المرض تحدي لكل البشرية بمختلف أديانهم بمختلف قومياتهم ألوانهم أعراقهم، أن الإنسان ضعيف أمام هذا الوباء والكل يريد العون من الله الخالق الواحد الأحد. فربما كما سمعنا في بعض المجتمعات والأمم هناك تقارب إلى الله عز وجل أكثر حصل. نحن مع كل هذا في بعض الأحيان زرنا أصدقائنا وأردنا أن نكسر هذا البروتوكول مع المراعاة الصحية. زرنا المسيحيين في بغداد، وفي شهر رمضان الماضي قد زارنا أيضا جملة كبيرة من علماء الأديان ومن السنة تحديدا. ففي بعد إيجابي وسلبي.
ولكن شيخنا كيف كوفيد-19 أثر على العلاقة بين المجتمعات الدينية والحكومات، خاصة عند وضع قوانين للحد من انتشار الوباء؟
بالجانب الديني حقيقة أيضا القوانين التي وضعت المؤسسة الدينية تؤمن وتدعو المجتمعات لاحترام القانون، هذا شيء واضح جدا. لا بد أن نحترم القانون ونحترم التوصيات الصحية من قبل المؤسسات المختصة، وهذا ما أكد عليها أو أكدت عليها المرجعية الدينية في العراق. ولذلك قد حرمنا منذ عامين للتشرف إلى الحج إلى مكة، وكثير من المناسبات الدينية قد ألغيت في العراق وفي المنطقة أيضا احتراما للتخصص والتوصيات الصحية.
شكرا. Elder Justina, let's hear your opinion on this. Could you give us some examples or success stories that we can learn from you when it comes to holding a dialogue or joint initiative on addressing COVID-19 related implications? Just unmute yourself, Elder Justina.
Okay. Was it my question?
Yes.
Okay.
I was asking, could you tell us maybe a couple of stories or successes that you achieved through dialogues or joint initiatives with religious communities to tackle COVID-19 and its implications?
Yes, just like Dr. Said has said, COVID-19 actually brought a lot of situations, ugly situations at the initial stage in Nigeria. And one of them was lack of preparedness on the side of the government, and it became a lot of issues. And we had a lot of total lockdown, which brought a lot of situations. Lockdown on economy, lockdown on the religious worship centers, and it became a lot of chaos. Not until religious leaders now came, we came together through the support we had from KAICIID and other well-meaning organizations. We had to really come to see how we can really fight against what was happening. And at that point, people were able to sit together to really now know what to do in order to move forward. And people in Nigeria also did not believe that COVID-19 was in existence. It was another serious challenge to us. And so because of that education we had at that time, we were able to now go online. The people, the religious leaders, we really discovered, the government is also discovered the role, the important role religious leaders can play in every society. So this interreligious dialogue is very, very necessary, especially in the world we are in today. It's very key. So when they now discover that these people can play a very serious role, they now started engaging with them. And these are some of the things that happened during that time. One of the things that happened was that we had to bring everybody together, and we observed the protocols of the COVID-19 as stated with National Center for Disease Control in Nigeria, and also guidelines given by WHO. And in that engagement, one of the lessons, very serious lessons that we are able to learn, it's also coming, I listened to Dr. Said from Iraq, and he said something like that also, that the Christian community and the Muslim community came together and agreed that they really need to be sober. It was a period of sober reflection, a period of seeing that we have common values as Christians and Muslims. Because in Nigeria, we have Christians and Muslims working together to make sure that they promote interreligious dialogue and interreligious activities. So they believe that they have all failed. In fact, one of the things that came up was that the two religions believe that this was coming as a result of punishment from God. We don't know the truth. It's one of the myths that came up. But the Christians and Muslims believe that people should repent because of what happened. And then the common humanity we share was very, very important. And then the two religions gathered together to get to the media to address the issue of COVID-19, letting people know, both Christians and Muslims, quoting their holy scriptures in defense of the fact that a disease exists and it's possible for COVID-19 to exist, and people should also adhere to the protocols and also abide by all those rules. And we have also what we call door-to-door campaigns. The Christians and Muslims community, we came together, we went to door-to-door, teaching people how to really protect themselves by wearing the PPEs, and also how to sanitize themselves, washing of hands regularly to make sure that this thing, because the truth of the matter was that if we allow COVID-19 the way it was to come into Africa, everybody would have died. And then the lockdown also brought another virus to us, which was hunger virus. And people said, instead of them to die of hunger at home, it's better they get out and die of COVID-19. It was a lot of issues in Nigeria and Africa as a whole, because we also had to interact with other people from Africa. It was a very serious issue. But the good thing was that religious leaders played a very key role. And one of those roles was they are also part of frontline workers. They played a lot of life-saving roles, because people were calling them and they were counseling them and making sure that they were able to be patient enough to wait until the government was able to send in the palliatives and also all the PPAs to make sure that they were able to continue with their lives. So it was a very good cooperation between Christians and Muslims, and it brought a lot of synergy between the two communities. And it also really synergized the relationship that exists. Even though in Nigeria we have a lot of problems with insurgency, and that is what is really hampering our peace, but these religious communities are really engaging to make sure that they speak with one voice to fight their common enemy.
Thank you. So you might agree with me that during COVID-19, the incidences of hate speech dramatically have increased. So stressing that the phenomena of hate speech is not limited to a particular race or religion, the acts of violence in the name of religion and the increased hate speech phenomena underscore the international community's responsibility to undertake genuine efforts to address the ongoing hate speech that led to it. So therefore, I would like to ask Reverend John if he has any example that he can share with us based on his previous experience on initiatives that eased this phenomena, that contributed to reduce the level of hate speech in certain communities or certain contexts, and contributed to create an infrastructure for responsiveness, mutual respect, cooperation, partnership, etc.
Well, there have been a lot of examples, I think. After the incidents in Charlottesville, Virginia, where you had a group, you had a coming together of various neo-Nazi organizations to protest. And among the things they did was to march around a synagogue in Charlottesville on a Friday night, shouting, "The Jews will not replace us." These kinds of examples of hatred have been publicly combated by a coalition of religious bodies, religious communities. Certainly when there were attacks on the Sikh religion and the houses of worship of the Sikh, from the Sikh tradition, when there were attacks on Muslims, there's coalitions of people at the grassroots level from various religious bodies actually went to these sites and just to form a chain of human bonding around the respective religious institution as a sign of commitment to human rights. In the context of COVID-19, unfortunately, we have had examples of kind of new forms of religious hatred developing over the vaccine. And there have been people in the various religious traditions, primarily in the Christian tradition, parts of the Christian tradition, and even in parts of the Catholic tradition, that have strongly opposed government mandates on vaccine. But this is where I think we need to begin to recognize how we are all part of what has been called the web of creation. And in terms of the religious communities, that we are bonded together, and we really have to intensify that bonding and really stand up for situations of injustice and interreligious intolerance. Because while there are difficult questions as to how far we can utilize our particular religious traditions in terms of the social fabric of multi-religious societies, nonetheless, I think we can never say that our understanding of religious liberty involves fundamental discrimination against other people and a lack of respect of their human dignity, or that it has to be, we have an exclusive right to have our perspective become the official perspective of a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society. This is not an easy question to resolve in the particular situations. But for example, I would say, and this seems to me to be a growing sense that in terms of the present situation, that we have to have growing collaboration in terms of making sure that people recognize and that they are bonded to other people. And if they refuse the vaccine for whatever reason, including religious reasons, they are really, I would say, disobeying God. And certainly Pope Francis and many of the Catholic bishops around the world have strongly said that taking the vaccine is a moral responsibility, a moral duty. The other issue is what people have called, and I know Pope Francis has spoken out against, what is called vaccine nationalism on the part of the countries that have the financial capacity to buy adequate supplies of vaccine for their population over against the majority of the countries who lack that capacity of providing vaccine because they do not have the financial capacity to do so. And we really have to address that. And it's incumbent upon the religious communities in the wealthiest countries to really insist that their governments make a commitment to provide vaccines for the entire global community. And I think that's a primary responsibility of the world religious communities at this point.
Thank you, Reverend. Since we are running out of time, I would like to ask each panelist to tell us an advice or a recommendation on how we, as actors in the field of interreligious dialogue, we can promote the freedom of religion and belief, and we can also navigate effectively through the different intersections of freedom of religion and belief with other human rights that we discussed today, including the right to health, the right to freedom of expression, the right to assembly and association, etc. So maybe if we can start with Dr. Syed, that would be perfect.
للحديث أتصور يعني أهم شيء لترسيخ الحرية الدينية واحترام الآخر والكرامة الإنسانية أن نضع كل هذه القيم الإنسانية المشتركة في المناهج الدراسية ونعلم أبنائنا منذ الصغر منذ المراحل الأولى على أن يحترموا الآخر ويحترموا الأديان الأخرى. هذا ما أتمناه أن أراه يوما ما في الشرق الأوسط وفي العراق. شكرا.
شكرا شيخنا. Justina? Just unmute your microphone, Elder Justina.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what we need to do is for us to constantly engage in religious literacy, especially coming from my own community in Nigeria. A lot of people do not really, they have a lot of ignorance on what religion is all about. What even the adherents, like Christians and Muslims, they don't really understand the scriptures. And we need to really educate them. We need constant education. So religious communities, religious leaders, as it's where they have a lot of role to play. And this is one of the things we have discovered. And we have a very serious program that we want to embark on now, Joint Initiative for Strategic Interreligious Action. It's called GISLA. And what it seeks to address is to see how we can go to those communities and begin to educate people. They should be able to understand one another, because we have come to realize that lack of education, lack of understanding, just like he has rightly said, Dr. Saeed, this curriculum in education, we should be able to put those things that people need to know And it is very important because people are acting ignorantly. They don't even understand what their religious text talks about, and they are fighting on a daily basis. So we need this constant education, and we need participation of all. If we want to talk about human rights and freedom of religion, everybody must participate. For example, women make half of the population of the entire world. We are up to 50%, or even a little bit below. And if you don't include such a percentages of people, and that is why you see in the Sustainable Development Goals, we are particular about inclusion of women in everything, because it has been discovered that these people are really up to half of the world's population, and they need to be included. They need to participate. Once you add them and allow them to participate, these issues would have been at a very PRS minimum. Thank you very much, KAICIID, for giving us the opportunity to really engage in this.
Thank you. Reverend Dr. Pawlikowski.
Well, just two comments. First of all, I think we have to reach a point where in each of our respective religious traditions, we understand interreligious collaboration as an essential and central part of our self-understanding as a particular religious community. Interreligious collaboration and dialogue cannot be seen as only something that a few people in our tradition kind of focus on. It can't become an isolated reality, but it has to become a very central and pivotal part of our fundamental self-identity. And I think Pope Francis has stressed this in a number of his speeches, saying we must bring interreligious collaboration within the Catholic community to the very center of self-identity. The second one is we must create opportunities, particularly at the grassroots level, for discussion and sharing of ideas, but sharing also of experiences among respective religious communities. Organizations like your organization, KAICIID, the Parliament of the World's Religions, and the United Religious Initiative have certainly promoted that. And as I already said, a lot of the interreligious change that occurred in the Catholic community was born in the collaboration and human interchange of people working for the rights of laborers in the 1930s and in the 1940s in the United States. So until we get to know each other as human persons, we're going to be, unfortunately, often too dominated in our approach by thinking that has perdured over the centuries in our respective traditions. So I agree with Dr. Said that the importance of education is, it has to have a high priority for all our religious communities.
This is a great note to close this webinar. It was really a pleasure. If you missed the conversation or parts of the conversation, please check our YouTube channel so you can follow up. At the end, I would like to thank our speakers and mostly the audience for their participation and being part of this event. We hope to see you at the next webinar. Please keep an eye on our social media for new announcements. Thank you very much and have a great day.